started a couple minutes early?
Sure. Yeah. You guys get some extra time.
You guys get rewarded for being punctual.
Extra XP for being punctual.
Five bonus XP.
So thank you guys so much for coming. Welcome to the Clinical Role panel. This is our D&D show where a bunch of geeky therapists sit around and play D&D. We're here today to talk a little bit about our game, but more about talking about how to use role-playing games as a form of therapy and how we all do that. What I'd like to do real quickly is just go down the line here and introduce everybody. I'll put up our cast here. I'll start off. So I'm Dr. Connell. I'm a psychologist at Southeast Psych, and I'm also a therapeutic dungeon master. I run 2 therapy D&D groups, and then I'm also the co-founder of the company Geeks Like Us. And under Geeks Like Us, I do the YouTube series Psych at the Table, and I also get to GM these awesome people with Clinical Role. And so we'll start down at the very end here and work our way this way.
So I'm laughing because there's a reason everybody calls me Dr. B, is that even my friends can't spell my name.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I look it up every time.
I have to look it up. I swear I copied and pasted that off Google.
Yeah.
I thought your last name was B.
So, pointless trivia that none of you will ever get to know is Raffael spelled with PH is Greek and Hebrew, FF is Italian, and 1F is Spanish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for coming. You have all you need.
Go, thank you, you're welcome. Your knowledge stat increased by 1.
A good day.
Did you spell the character name right?
No, she spelled the character name right, I think. But I'm Dr. B. I am the clinical director of Take This, if you all heard of that. I actually recognize some of you from years past having been up in the AFK room, because I've got a weird memory for that. And for those of you who don't know about the AFK room, it is the first of its kind staffed mental health space that is actually staffed by at least 1 clinician at all times, that we now run in every PAX event worldwide, as well as E3, MomoCon, MagFest, and others. It's been busier. But I also have a private practice in the Seattle area, and I guess I'm technically one of the other 2 guys' competitors. Although they're great competitors because it's awesome to talk to them all the time and bounce ideas off of each other and send people their way. But yeah, I do applied D&D teaching social skills to teens on the spectrum.
So I'm Dr. Ryan Kelly, and I'm kind of better than Dr. B.
No fight.
He's much better here. Ryan, you have a much better.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't know that.
I actually just wanted to compliment your beard.
You just wanted a chance to call me handsome.
In front of everyone.
Give me 3 days. You mentioned Italian?
Yeah.
So I'm a psychologist in Charlotte, North Carolina. I got into D&D. I work a lot with kids on the spectrum, kid and adolescents on the spectrum. Made a graphic novel called Max Gamer about a superhero who has Asperger's, and it's something that naturally led me into D&D. And then Megan came to work with me. We both work at Southeast Psych, and kind of been doing it ever since. Thanks, you.
I'm going to cut it line here. My name is Davis. I have a master's in education with a specialization in drama therapy, along with Adam Davis. Along with Adam.
We're very similar.
They get confused by
Sometimes we finish each other's sentences, or sometimes we even talk at the same time. We talk at the same time.
Didn't work. It didn't work.
I probably split this up. The other Adam. We founded an organization called Wheelhouse Workshop several years ago. We've been using tabletop role-playing games and therapeutic social skills groups for about 7 years. We most recently founded a nonprofit organization called Game to Grow, which is looking to expand some of that work. Right now we have 5 weekly social skills groups using Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We see almost 40 kids every week in our therapeutic social skills groups.
That's a lot of kids. So I'm Adam Johns. I'm also the co-founder of Game to Grow and the executive director. I also am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Seattle area. I run private practice there as well.
Hey! Oh, no, of course you were the one who had Kleenex, the marriage and family.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know your business. I'm really excited to announce that Game to Grow has just gotten the go-ahead to announce a big project that we're working on, and the Kickstarter is going to come out in about 6 weeks, where we're going to be designing a kit called Critical Core. And Critical Core is going to be a sort of take-home kit that teaches you how to play Dungeons & Dragons, as well as includes a module that builds social skills as a part of the module and as part of the play. So you can take that home as parents, as therapists, as just game masters, and run some of your own groups and get some of the foundation of the work that we are doing. So look it up, it's criticalcore.org. The Kickstarter's going to launch in about 6 weeks, and we're hoping to get a lot of people on our mailing list so that they're ready to go as soon as the Kickstarter launches. That's my big pitch.
Gina Scarlett is our new player, but she had a medical emergency, so wasn't able to come and sends her deepest regrets. I just want to say hi to everybody. And she writes some amazing books. She has Superhero Therapy, Harry Potter Therapy, and then Hero's Quest is, I think, her newest book that just came out. And she also co-authors the comic book. So her superpower is writing lots and lots of books.
She has a time turner. She has a time turner.
She has to.
Same time. Same time.
Is it just a competition? Is it like outside versus outside?
I don't know. I think I've been dragged into this.
Turn it off now. That's crazy.
It's like it's just one person.
I am the avatar of Costello now. This is great.
Well, and so before we get started with like the panel questions, so this is actually the first time all of us have been in a room together. So, as Dungeon Masters, a few things that I think you should do when you've been running a group for a while and they've been awesome to you, which one of them is to give dice to your players. So.
Thank you.
Because I'm a crier.
Were these purposefully picked in octopus?
Yes, I did purposely to get off.
For those who don't know, my character, well, we'll get into that, but my character's a druid and has shapeshifted into an octopus on land during those times.
And actually, before we go into the next part of the cool surprise and treat I have for you guys, can you go down and just introduce the characters that you've been playing in
Sure. Emerald, how much detail do you want?
Whatever you feel like.
Okay, Emerald is...
It was like an emotional landscape.
An emotional landscape. Well, Emerald was born at a very young age. His early memories were lots of shapes and things disappearing and reappearing. And we didn't have that much nurturing, actually. Emerald grew up on the streets as a thief and a pickpocket, so he definitely did not have the same origin story as Aurora Monroe. Where he picked the wrong pocket and suddenly wore the right pocket, and that person became his teacher at the monastery that sort of discovered him. But he's got a lot of lingering effects from growing up on the streets. He has a tendency to kind of hoard trinkets and food in his pocket. It's also a little snippy.
Yeah. I sometimes feel like Emerald doesn't like Baird very much.
I think we made the mistake that most of us are kind of idiot characters. He's just the whole time like, can we just?
He's like a serious character.
That's right.
Which is really ironic because anybody else that take this would tell you I'm the one who has to be managed. I'm going that way. No, you're not. Okay. So I'm kind of like the NPC guy at the moment because for a while I played one character who was 2-in-1, and it's by in no way copyright infringement of Dick and Marty. Totally unique character with kind of, but I played at the same time, and because of the characters, it's Rick and Morty. It's Rick and Morty. No, it's not. Or shoot, Dick and Marty. That same voice, I was like, they'd be like, Marty, we need to roll this back. Oh, geez, Dick. And then it would get exhausting, and for like 4 hours, and I'd be like, oh, yeah. So it was sort of, and then naturally it's happened. But now, my character is Nick Manu, and he's an interesting character because he's like a pirate, but he's also firm advocate of like manners and organization, and he's also like really scared and very forgetful as well. And kind of like, I think it was starting off with like oh yeah, my name's Nick Manu, and then it wound up being like this, like,
Oh, yeah, go sneak my name.
Like this, like the rock guy from Thor Ragnarok is like, oh, I'm him. Okay, I'm that guy.
I was thinking Captain Shakespeare.
Who?
Stardust.
What?
Thank you. I told you I'd win him over.
That's Verdin. So Verdin is a gnome druid who believes that he's a dwarf. Verdin was found, he's actually Dracula's brother. And Verdin was found in the forest at a very young age, and has mostly like blocked out his young childhood. I think he has a recognition that he knows that he's a little different, but he was found by a group of dwarf barbarians and raised in that tribe. And never really found his place as a barbarian. And when he went out and onto his barbarian trials where he had to survive for a year by himself in the woods, he found that he gained shape-shifting powers blessed to him by the wolf spirit, the great wolf spirit, which was the spirit worshipped by the tribe. And so he came back from that trial only to find that his entire tribe had been wiped out by tribes.
And Ragnold, my brother,
Yeah.
is a dwarf. Ragnold is a dwarf barbarian who has sort of taken Verdin under his wing. And Ragnold is very low intelligence, but very well-meaning. He was the brewmaster for his tribe, going in sort of a stereotypical warden thing. And he likes to like scout around and wander around in jungles for interesting things to make ale out of.
Nice.
Yeah. Verdin and Ragnold spend a lot of time sort of recorrecting each other, or maybe uncorrecting each other, is maybe a good way to put it. And they both are pretty irreverent most of the time. But occasionally actually pay attention to what's going on, and mostly do what Emerald tells them.
Yeah.
He just needs to have explicit instructions.
Well, and Emerald is often perplexed how both of you know some of the words you do, given the words you don't know.
Dad, I learned it from you.
Well, and one more thing that I think should happen at this point is character art. So I drew art for you guys. Ready? 'Cause
That's amazing.
There's a screen right here.
There's a refrigerator waiting for that. I'm thinking alternatively.
I want to pin it to my
No, I'm kidding. I might have asked an actual artist to do it.
Oh,
Wow. Hey.
These are really
And
good.
I've had Zazu
Alexi April.
played with us for so long too.
Yeah.
Zazu was our first guest player, was Joe Lassie, who's a graduate student out in San Diego. So.
That's awesome.
Man, that's cool. Ragnold, I think you've got a wound thing.
Actually, so my wife just asked how I'm doing, how this is going. If you guys could do me a favor, so I'm gonna take a video and I want you all to like boo. Like, oh my God, and I want you guys to be like, and just so I can let her know how it's going. All right, so you guys, like, this is hard. Ralph, you continue to, exactly. All right, are we ready?
Yep.
All right, go.
something. Parents leave their children in our charge.
It's a mistake. Oh my God.
We're super responsible.
We create our own clientele.
So before we jump into some of the questions that we have, I wanted to ask each of you, how did you get into playing D&D, and what's your favorite story from playing, either as a dungeon master or as a player? And we'll start over the Adam system.
I played Dungeons & Dragons the first time when I think I was about 8 years old. So I'm from South Texas. So I was playing at a time when Dungeons & Dragons was not entirely approved of. So I learned how to play at Boy Scout camp. And as you can imagine, we were playing, we would go back and forth between Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, and the Scoutmaster literally came over and shook our tent and said, "Quit doing that devil stuff!" I really enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons as a player and as a game master, and I think one of my favorite journeys is I played a character in actually a game that Adam ran, whose name was Elbrin Moonshadow, and he was a character who could change his face at all times. And I believe very firmly that everybody plays characters for a reason. And I was a classroom teacher, and I was also running groups for Wheelhouse Workshop all the time, so I was like being really nice to people all the time, as you have to a certain extent as a teacher and a therapist. And Elbrin was really mean. And I discovered that I had this need to just be mean to every NPC that Adam played.
It was ridiculous because I was the dungeon master and I would play they would go, are there any carts selling food? And I'd be like, yeah, there's a lime cart. You guys can buy lime.
Like, knock over his leg.
Elbrin would come up and just insult all of my characters. I'd be like, hi guys, I'm the lime salesman.
There's a chipper over there.
Well, I don't, my boss sets the prices. I don't really get that.
But so, Elbrin was this super mean character who made all the NPCs just feel terrible about themselves. But I learned something valuable about myself. Elbrin also could shapeshift, and so he would change his face to meet every different person he met. And I realized that I was doing that as a professional. I was always putting on a public face for other people. Elbrin got to use that public face to me, where my public face was always one that was very professional or very nurturing to students or clients. And I realized that what Elbrin really needed was to have people see his real face. And I had this amazing journey through Elbrin, who was always doing the thing that other people expected him to do, even if it was my fellow teammates expecting me to be mean to all the NPCs. I realized that Elbrin and I both had this tremendous need for people to see the real us, and not whatever the people needed us to be. It was my journey through Elbrin helped me sort of understand myself better, and the fact that sometimes I needed to be a little bit more aggressive. I was being too nice in my personal life, my public professional life.
So I guess I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I started in 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and probably when I was 8 or 10. And I remember at the time I had some friends down the street who got the player's handbook. We didn't actually learn any of the rules. We just sat down and started playing, and we all thought the Paladin was the most powerful class in the game because he could cast spells and melee and wear heavy armor. But we didn't actually learn any of the rules of the Paladin, so we all just went around just look up a spell and look back at I cast fireball at that guy. And so it wasn't until we finally started learning the rules that we went, we should pick dynamic classes and choose other things. And I still remember back in those days, I actually used to play, my friend Max was the friend who had the player's handbook. And we had a falling out when I went to high school. We just weren't really friends anymore. I was kind of a nerd, and he was kind of a jock, and kind of went in different directions. And it wasn't until a few years ago where I ran into Max again. I hadn't seen him in 10, 15 years. And I said, yeah, I actually use Dungeons and Dragons now to teach social skills. And we just started reminiscing about the stories from our games. And it had been 15 years, and he hasn't played Dungeons and Dragons in all that time, and it didn't matter. We could still talk about the stories from those games. We could still talk about all the crazy things that we did on those adventures. How many kings that we overthrew, because that's the only plotline that we kept doing was just and he still remembered all of them. And those experiences stuck with me just so tremendously throughout my entire life, and they're part of the motivation that they got me into this work, and that reminded me just how important those experiences have been to me and how important they could be to other people as I helped them through that same journey.
Wow, so those are two wonderfully substantive responses. One's going to be body healing. So I got into D&D actually maybe about 2 years ago, so I'm fairly new to it. And what led me to it was I was doing research. I was actually in academia before I was in practice. And I was doing research on how to make social skills interventions more enjoyable, better for rapport, and also more effective. And one way of doing that was including special interest areas, because largely I was focusing on Aspies, but really it applies to anybody. It's sort of the crux of geek therapy, which we all practice. And as it was going along, I was like, okay, so now we need to use computer-mediated and video game devices. So we worked with some people, Mark Zimmerman, who does Pixar, created Social Express, a video game basically for social skills. And each social skill group requires certain things that when I took a look at D&D, it's like, it has everything. Like this has every single thing they would ever need. It's just a little bit of a more therapeutic structure, which, you know, these guys had already been pretty much doing, actually. So, you know, when Megan came to Southeast and she did that stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, let's get into this. And I wanted to play too, and Connell was good. I like it very much. I think I'm bearable.
Here are you?
I need validation. So, I guess my favorite story was, so I was playing as Dick and Marty, and what would often happen is I would just constantly be pursuing like punchlines and jokes, to the point I think it got obnoxious sometimes, and I had to do two people, right? So there was very little, like, you know, ability for other people to get
Was this episode 1?
I think my episode.
Oh my god!
Well, the box.
One of my best puns ever!
Yeah, that's right. So, I'm being kind of like a D-bag, and, you know, Megan is the GM, is like, I gotta figure out a way to shut this down. I'm thinking that's what she's thinking. And she's like, you know, I'm gonna put you in the box of 4. So,
No, that was completely from the NPC, so it was the high-powered wizard that you were antagonizing.
That's always antagonizing.
Yeah, you're hitting on her too much.
Oh, that's what it was. I had too many drinks at the bar.
Yeah.
Like, that was like hitting on bars. It was the kind of thing. It was like, cheat, Dick. You probably shouldn't objectify them. Marty, they're bards. They're meant to be objectified. And it was like trying to go on. I'd really been drinking too much, and so I was hitting on everything. It was a very hedonistic character. So she put me in a box, you know, an invisible box of force, and I was doing my thing, and then Raph said,
Did we just put Dick in a box?
I did it for about 20 minutes. It was like, put a hole in the box. Like, it was like derailed from the game. It was like a huge distraction.
Oh god, when you set me up, I mean, you gotta softball it in like that.
I did. And those are my favorite D&D moments, are like the, where it's not even pushing the plot along, it's just messing around with characters, you know?
Okay, so I discovered D&D in high school. For those of you who have ever been to Seattle, it is very, very hilly. And when it snows there, we all freak out because there's sheets of ice on hills. And so I was stuck at a friend's house for a couple days because it was one of the rare big snowstorms we have. We started playing D&D because they already did, and I was like, this is cool. I was an actor. I'm like, this is fun. I get to act and slay things. Badass. And I just kept with it, and how I got into this was I had this brilliant original idea of utilizing this in a cognitive behavioral therapeutic setting, teaching social skills, and I called up a mutual friend of Adam and I's, and I was like, Anna, I got this brilliant idea. And she's so patient, she's so lovely, and she listened for like 20 minutes as I info dumped on her. And she said, that's cool, we're already doing it. I'm like, what? And then like 15 years later, well, and Dr. B, guys, I got this great idea. And it's so funny because when she brought me on to the organization that I currently work for called Aspiring Youth, that's in a way how I met Adam and we got to talking, and it led to some other stuff. I ended up on still one of the high points of my career because I was such a geek. I was on the Dragon Talk podcast like 2 years ago, and then Megan reached out, and that's how I met Megan. But one of my favorite stories for D&D, because I grew up not knowing I was on the autism spectrum. Because I'm an actor, and I'm also really good apparently at noticing patterns, so I mimic people, and I'm good at social camouflage. Until you get to know me well enough, and then I'm like a half step out of sync from time to time, and they're like, But I love working with kids on the spectrum to help teach them social skills in a way that they don't have to go through it the same way I did. A lot of the times the kids I work with have a hard time differentiating themselves from their characters. And that's a big struggle, because they take, if their character is kind of antagonistic, they take it personally. And I remember one day when one of the kids who struggled with it so badly got up, and she was the most goody-goody paladin ever, and she didn't understand why everybody hated her. And she got up, because we actually had one character who was the only evil character we've ever allowed, because he was so good at being lawful evil that he actually helped the party. He was a lawful evil paladin. And they got into a screaming match in character. She stood up, slammed her hand on the table, and just started screaming paladin-esque, really weak insults. But screaming insults that she thought were insulting at this other character, and he started releasing a tirade of actual insults back at her. And everybody was laughing. It finally clicked for her that the perspective of her character is not her. And it was so amazing to see, and that just remains my absolute favorite story.
Dick's story, wonderfully substantive. Yeah, that's
You know, lawful good, just terribly so. I wish I were.
Well, let's jump into a few of the questions that we got from Twitter before, and then my thought for this panel was to mostly answer your questions, but now you guys probably have a lot of questions. So we got a question from someone at the Joe Show 13, Joe Lastly guy. I don't know.
Some heard of him.
Yeah.
Loser.
Yeah.
Mostly because he's not here.
So he wants to know, what do we have to say about how sometimes playing can be therapeutic but not therapy? And for those that are running games but aren't therapists, what are the boundaries between helpful play and therapy?
You should start down at that end.
Yeah. I see.
Okay.
No, you know it's a soapbox of mine.
So I can start with this because I'm actually not a licensed therapist. So I have a master's in education, like I said, with a specialization in drama therapy. So I've taken a lot of therapy classes, but I'm not a licensed therapist. So it's very important that I don't do capital T therapy. So if a player comes in and wants to deal with things like suicidality, if there are things that are outside of my scope, I will not address them. That is very, very important. And I can refer them to another guy that I know who is a therapist, a licensed therapist, if they need that kind of capital T therapy. But one of the things that we say a lot is that playing a role-playing game in a therapeutic way is, it's like the difference between a therapist having a really meaningful conversation and just being able to talk to somebody. You can just talk to somebody and that can be good. You can have a really meaningful conversation that's very empowering and very enriching, can cause you some insight, and that's fantastic. Good friends can provide that. And then there's also therapy. Those are very different things along the spectrum.
Going to a therapist is much more about the contract. A therapist can be friendly, a therapist can be warm and inviting, and really, in most cases, really should be. But a big part of it is the contract that you have. The therapist is going to push you. The therapist is going to encourage you to grow and to change, and encourage you to challenge yourself in a lot of ways that a friend won't necessarily do. And a part of what you're paying for when you go to see a therapist is that idea, that contract between the two of you. You know the therapist is working to help you, and it's not just being your friend. A therapeutic game master does the same thing. A therapeutic game master will put you into situations where you might be frustrated, where you might be unhappy. This might not be the way you want to play your character, this might not be the way you want to play the game. But it's a recognition on the idea that the therapeutic game master is going to push you in a way that is going to help you grow. And sometimes that is more important. And it also means that we usually encourage most of our players to have other games as well. Because just because I have a therapist doesn't mean I don't want to have some friends, or I don't want to talk to my friends. So we encourage most of our players, or all of our players, to, in addition to coming to our groups and learning how to socialize and learning how to get pushed and grow and change and improve, go play your own game. Can be murder hobos. Go kill whatever stuff you want to kill in your own game, and be a part of that experience, because that's still important as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the way I think of it is, the difference between talking to friends that care about you and that you feel supported by and that give you company and that kind of reflect your strengths versus talking to somebody about that maybe only a handful of people you would, that you're trying to proactively work on or that you're unsure about, and especially if it's getting into more, clinical matters like suicidality and things that were alluded to by the Adams as DJ. But one thing I'll say that is kind of indirectly related to that question that I've observed is kind of flipping the question around a little bit of like a psychologist like myself, if we were to try to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and run a D&D game for therapy. Is he shaking his head yes over there? He supports me. But in not being fully prepared for that, because that's kind of an issue on its own, actually, that I'm not sure is totally addressed. So usually I'm kind of running a little bit. Megan, I get to run my own, but I'm getting my little wings, they just don't fly very well. But I'll get to be out them.
Yeah, I'm going to continue with that point because I'm actually leading a full-day workshop in the Seattle area this fall on the trans-theoretical applications of applied role-playing in therapeutic settings. And we get questions all the time from people like, how do we do what you do? And I'm kind of douchey when I answer, I'm like, don't. Because in order to do this well, you go to a therapist because they understand psychological theory and how to apply it. You go to a DM or a GM because they understand the theory and the structure of role-playing games and how to apply it. In order to go to somebody who is using role-playing games for therapeutic or even social skills purposes, you have to go to someone who understands thoroughly both and has to be good at both. Because when you think about it, a good DM makes the game story-centric and the players interact with it. A therapeutic DM not only has to be able to conceptualize where you are as an individual, but you have to make the game fun and make the game change on the spot to scaffold and or help you meet your individual social skills goals or therapeutic goals while still keeping the game moving forward. Doesn't sound so easy now, does it? Because it's not. And so this is actually why we all talk really regularly about this issue and how to do it, and why I'm actually very passionate about training other clinicians to do it or not do it, because it's more intimidating than you think.
You guys answered some of my anything From John Morley at John Morley Web, I'd like to hear some stories, example of events in the game that had, or how you can use the game to model CBT techniques, dealing with different.
Oh, now we're going to toss that one over to you.
Let's go right to that one.
Okay. God, how do I do this without not going into a primer about what CBT is? Okay, actually, I can do it really quickly. Cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the first, it was like the first form of therapy that was applied that came out of research and settings instead of some Viennese guys sitting around going, yeah, man, I think this is how it works. Yeah, it makes sense to me. You breastfeed too long, then you have a neurosis, I don't know. But CBT is based on empiricism and classic skepticism and this idea that the way you think about situations dictates how you act and how you feel. So if, in Seattle, we have a hobo spider mating season at the end of August / early September, and they are fast little bastards. They are the fastest spiders in the world. And a lot of people are like, ugh, because you have a different association with it than I do. Me, I'm gonna scream, because I'm arachnophobic. But by using that, we can use different techniques like reinforcing or punishing various behaviors to change how you think about a situation. Over time, that starts to become a cycle upon itself. And how role-playing games do that? Well, rewards and punishments are kind of built into the game. I love it for that fact. We actually, a technique that my co-facilitator and I use, we collectively reward and punish various target behaviors for the full group. So patience, waiting your turn, being ready on your turn, preparing, everybody gets bonus XP for that. And that's sort of what's called operant conditioning is built into the game. And so is my annoyance when I'm like, no, what's your AC? No, okay, you done made the DM mad again. What resistance do you have? Don't care. Boom, rock falls again. There's actually a couple characters they know are just going to get real punchy, a couple of NPCs. But I love using both operant reinforcement and punishment as well as social rehearsal and reinforcing that to get to target behaviors.
Yeah, and so, kind of what Roth was saying is you get the thoughts, the feelings, and behaviors, and then what he talked about is largely the behaviors. And the behavioral is very, very important, and then you also have an access here to the thought side of it. And, with anything with CBT, the first thing we're trying to get people to realize is, you know what? Just like we have behavioral habits, we have thought habits as well, and you develop some. over the years, and those might have developed because you had a predisposition toward anxiety or depression. So you started off with, glass is half empty.
No, it's not.
Now it's half empty. What's the point of drinking it, right? It just kind of keeps going.
It's dirty. It's not completely clear. I don't like it. Which cognitive distortion was that? I don't know.
Right. And it becomes like you just assume everybody else thinks that way about everything, and you don't realize that if it's healthy or unhealthy. So at the very beginning, it's kind of like trying to put a face to this, literally and figuratively, of how do I think and how does this affect me negatively? And something that's really tough, I think, especially for people on the spectrum, is having that kind of objectivity socially. It's almost like trying to be social inward in a way. And so if you have a character making decisions that has kind of been projecting themselves onto that character a lot of time, at least in some ways, and you can do sort of, Megan and I do like social check, cognitive checks when things occur. Is we had a kid with real bad anxiety once, and she would just always want to help people, which is great, and kind of hang back from the fight. But after a while, I was like, man, she's withdrawing all the time. Like she is always avoiding it and kind of masking under, I want to care for people, which absolutely she does. But it's also talking about her character. She was able to come up, well, I just think she thinks she's going to fail. Or like, what if she gets hurt? Or what if everybody dies because she messed up her spell? Or she rolls a low number, and then what's she gonna, like all these things, and that's what she thinks always, right? And then being able to have that and kind of be like, I wonder if you ever relate to that much crime, and then eventually did very, very well. But it's I think it's just a very nice reflection for the thought side of it. It's like now we know. Now why don't we play a character that thinks the total opposite? And let's start practicing that. Let's start practicing someone who's like glasses half full, feeling good about self-confident. It could be a really, really awesome thing.
I love doing that to people just because there's a mad scientist in the back of my head that's like, yes. Frustration.
You realize it's one in the front of your head too, right? It's just it's not subtle.
Ear feels guilty.
Way back there. Way.
Sometimes.
Well, I will say too, in the games, one of the things I like to see is giving the kids a practical time to practice things that they've learned in therapy.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
in my social skills group, they interacted with an NPC who was being bullied by another kid in the village. And I didn't know where they were going to go with it, but what they did was they sat down with this NPC and they all went over everything they had all learned in their different individual therapies on how to handle bullies. And so they spent a good 20 minutes talking about, okay, this is the thing, here's different things you can do. If the bully does this, you can try this thing. You can go get a grown-up, you can do this thing. And then in the end, they did also give him a dagger and said, and then if you just really bad. And then it's like, I can just cut it. I had originally planned that out where I thought the characters would confront the bully, but they did such an awesome job of teaching this NPC and helping him practice the skills that he needed to confront his bully that I was like, there's no need for them now to step in and intervene. They empowered this NPC enough. So that opportunity to reinforce what they've been learning in the game was just awesome.
We actually did a similar kind of intervention where we had all the players that needed to buddy up to somebody at a very fancy party. And the players all had to convince this other person that they could get a token that would allow them to get into a secret organization battleground. And so in order to, they were all these very wealthy people, and the players all had to play the role of like, how do I come into this party and figure out what this NPC wants so that I can give it to them. And the way that we did it was that we made cards for every NPC, and we had the other players at the table all play the NPCs as well. So we handed the cards out. Each card had a name of the person and a description for what they looked like and how they were acting. And then the back of the card had information for what the player character needed to do in order to convince the NPC that this was, that they would get the token, that they were friendly, or that they could connect with that person. And so they all have different things. And most of the players in our games basically try two techniques at the start of every NPC interaction, which I believe are threatening and attacking. Most of the techniques they try. So we actually had to go through and make a big list. You can't use those techniques here. Let's make a list of other techniques. How do you get along with somebody? How do you talk with somebody? And there were all things like, oh, we get a shared interest, and we can share a something.
make them laugh.
Yeah, make them laugh. Tell a joke. Tell a story.
It's like pulled from an improv game or a drama game, as my background is in drama therapy. So we're basically pulling from like a return desk if we were playing this improv game where there's like one way that this NPC, or we actually had the players with the 3x5 cards playing all of the NPCs also. And it was a great way for them to like make a list of all of the tactics they could think of. And then we could also throw some extra ones in, but let us sort of assess as a group what their repertoire was of tactics. If they want to make a friend, they want to convince somebody, or they want to ask somebody to do something, what are the tactics we have in our toolkit already?
And it was great. They would go through one by one and try each thing. And they would go up to the NPC, and then the player who was playing it would decide, no, that wasn't the right way. And they would come up with how that NPC would react to that same situation. Which I think shares a lot of that thing. Dr. B, we might not be so different after all.
Well, the difference is you're not writing down the other people's techniques to steal them later, so. I actually love listening to Adam and Adam talk because they come at this from such a different perspective than I do, and the way they think about it is so different that I just end up learning a ton from the way they do things. Because in a million years, it's just not how I would think. And it's just awesome to have so many people up here that do things so differently that you can learn from or steal from over the
Yeah, I like the variety. It's great.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons too I wanted us to all play this game together, because when we were chatting, like we weren't really friends. And
Davies actually.
I hated Ryan so much.
I still do.
But yeah, I wanted to create a game where we could play together and model self-care, and also get to know one another and get to know other people in the community who are using D&D as therapy or interested in that, working in that area. So my hope with Clinical Role is that at some point, pretty much everybody who's doing geek therapy or using D&D as therapy comes on as a guest or has a couple of appearances with us, so that way we could game with them, but then it's a way for us to get to know people and to network.
Because the reality is there's actually a lot of people who are doing this. We've all gotten started, and we run regular groups, and we do this in a very vocal way, and we try to get up in front of you guys, in front of audiences and PAXs, and things like that, and talk about the work that we're doing. But the one thing that Adam and I have learned, this is 22nd talk at a convention or something like that.
Is it really?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
I include
We had to go back and count
the workshops we've led.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking engagements.
So one of the things that we learned is there's a ton of people at schools, people in therapy practices, people who are around the world who are using role-playing games in a beneficial way, and they're just not connected with each other. And a lot of them, most of them are trained individuals who have a background in both gaming and therapy, or gaming and education, and they're applying those things together. And it's so exciting to see, but it's also crazy that there just hasn't been that opportunity for everybody to connect. That's a big part of the goal that we have in being able to get up here, is to help people connect, to have people who are reaching out to us, and then we can get them connected with each other, or to have people being able to build on each other's ideas, just like Dr. B stealing our ideas and us stealing a lot of his behavioral interventions with our ADHD kids.
Shame works.
It's the drop. But being able to do that back and forth is what's going to make this just a tremendous field, and it's what's going to turn us into a community of people doing this rather than just some individuals.
Let's do one more for Twitter questions, and we'll open up for questions from you guys. This is from Team Library RPG. How do you go about proposing using D&D or RPGs as therapy to parents who might not be so convinced?
They are so good at this.
I get asked this question a lot. A lot of people, teachers want to do this kind of thing as an after-school program. There's so many different people who want to get into doing this, but there's always sort of a gatekeeper who's keeping it from being implemented in a school or a clinic or something like that. The advice I always give is speak the language of the person you're trying to convince. Because when you come to a GeekCon, I can say, we play 5E. You guys are like, I know what that means. I don't play Pathfinder, it's a little crunchy. You guys know what that means. If I did that to a principal, they would not understand it, and it would be off-putting. So there's a really important way to talk to parents and teachers and clinicians to speak their language. So Teachers, if you're trying to convince a teacher, you really want to talk about how a game like Dungeons and Dragons encourages cooperation, encourages building on other people's ideas. You're going to build social relationships, which might help you with group activities. They might stay in school longer because they're building some frustration tolerance. Those are all things teachers care about. Therapists care about other kinds of behavioral changes and things like that. Parents want to see their kids having fun with other kids. So many of the young people who come to our groups are very socially isolated and oftentimes bullied at school, have really difficult social experiences. And so one of the ways that we can paint a picture to show what would happen in our group is to say, well, imagine your son or daughter, your child, having fun with other kids and having a place where there's going to be other kids they look forward to going. Some of the kids in our groups refer to our group as their second home, as their family. There's so many kids who, they can find themselves in their character, and they can experience the joys of being social, sometimes for the first time.
We've heard from kids and from parents as well saying that our group is the only thing that they look forward to leaving the house for. And that kind of experience is not something, these are our kids that are otherwise very socially isolated and have a lot of trouble being able to connect with other people. And to know that they can come to this group and have a fun time and laugh and enjoy themselves with others, that really goes a long way. It's also worthwhile to think about how would you explain Dungeons and Dragons to somebody who's never seen anything like that, which is always a real challenge. All of us, just by show of hands, who has played a tabletop role-playing game of some kind? You guys all know what it looks like.
Hold on, I'm curious. Who does not play one? Look at that.
Oh my God!
You are awesome! Awesome! Way to meet you! Yes! No, screw gatekeeping!
It's just wonderful. But the big question is, how do you explain it? And a lot of times what we say is that there's a person who is the dungeon master, they're like the referee of the game, and that lead storyteller. What this really is it's a storytelling game that we tell together at the table. And all the other people at the table are players at that table, and each of them is playing a character. It's a game that has no screens involved. You're playing with pieces of paper, and the pieces of paper tell you things about your character, like how strong you are, what kind of equipment you have on. And then the dungeon master, the head storyteller, says things like, you walk into a room and you can see that there's dust on the walls, and the room is made of stone, and across the way there's a door, and in front of the door there's bars. And then all the player characters get to take an opportunity to walk through all the people sitting at the table to describe what their character does with their own group. And that is Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and I think those are great points, and especially about the language, and that's, the first part is getting a stake in it, in particular a comfortable one, where it's, I kind of know what's going on, I know what the benefits of this are, and then once you do have that, you kind of got the initial buy-in, kind of like a step-by-step of how in the world as a parent or as a school do I do this, whether it be from a system standpoint, how do I get this out, how much it's going to cost, to okay, I have to be the GM, I have to be the big guy on this thing, and I don't even know what a paladin is yet, that's going to be kind of horrifying. In which case, so Megan and I are creating something similar as the Adams is, but largely just for Asperger's, and a lot of social scripts, and it literally is all right, if they do this, here's exactly what you do. It's like as a parent, they have a script, and it might not sound great at first, oh, this is furry brow, oh, that's weird that you did that. It might not seem great, but at least they're I know what to do. I'm not having to ad lib. I don't have to bank this on this wealth of knowledge and practice to the point where they're oh, this is actually okay. Maybe even they join one of the therapy group nights or zone night, which some we do, just have kids come play, just to get used to it and have the exposure.
I like to get really clinical on a lot of the parents that we talk with, my group talks with. Well, no, and this is complete manipulation on my part, but because I have a doctorate, they give me a ridiculous amount of credibility, fools. But I use big words, and suddenly they're yeah, big words like phenomenological experience, and right? Yes, that's worth it. But no, I talk to the parents largely about getting the kids who come to me in our group are largely, their parents are concerned about how much screen time they have. And so we talk about buy-in and behavior replacement because, you don't get to just go up to most people and say, stop it, and they actually do. It's easier if you have a substitute behavior, and if you've got a substitute behavior that's also pro-social, teaches various skills, and is on a topic matter like games that they're already invested in. And I gotta give a shout out to Wizards of the Coast for the creation of D&D Beyond, because that has lowered the price point of entry for my groups to 0, because I purchase the material and the kids, by signing up for a free D&D Beyond account, they get access to all the materials I purchase. So I bring dice, I bring a pencil, and they don't even need to buy a rule book because they get it for free. And so talking about all that stuff in the language that parents like to hear, free, improved behavior, pro-social, no screens, and okay.
Oh, and I will say this, and if they're asked, the thing you're always going to have to touch on with the parents is the very real concern, is this going to be their new pervasive interest? That they're not going to let go, and that they're going to, and you just address it by, we can't just remove everything interesting in the world to them.
Right.
Like, that's going to solve the problem.
Well, you want them to have no hobby? Oh, wait, no, I don't. That's just what I think.
We like to say, how great would it be for their pervasive interest to be a pro-social activity?
Yeah.
Well, and even to say it's not about getting rid of the interest, it's about addressing the pervasiveness. So let's find tools and give them one to practice where they can develop the skills where it's in moderation. Why not do it one where they're very social? So it's a phenomenal way to do it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things that is unique about my practice as a therapeutic DM is I run an all-girls group where we're focused on empowerment and teaching leadership skills to girls. And one of the parents just gave me like a silver bullet to convince parents that this is an awesome group for girls, which was they sat down and they were saying, like, I've seen my daughter with her friends from school and with her friends from D&D. With her school friends, there's always this competitive meanness that seems to underline everything that they do. They're friends, but they're snippy with each other, they get these backhanded compliments, and it's never a comfortable feeling in the room. She gets together with her D&D friends, and she relaxes, they are all supporting one another, they all have each other's backs, and like, I know they are so kind to each other. And that is just such a golden thing to teach these girls, one, how to be a leader, two, how to problem solve and stand up for themselves, but then also how to support one another and not try to cut one another down. It's been amazing to see. All right, I have more questions here, but if you guys have questions, we have 2 mics, so I'll open it up to the floor for questions.
If you don't ask questions, we're literally just going to talk.
You just want to walk up. You just want to walk up and
I'm going to take a picture for our Twitter as well. I'm going to take like 4 pictures. There's so many.
Yeah, we'll start with you. Yeah. Hi.
Hey. Hello. Hey.
So I'm planning to enroll into social work, and I just want to like how you like that like a lot of stuff and how like emotionally taxing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the question was how do you not let yourself become emotionally taxed by the work?
Really good question.
That's a very good question.
You got an answer? I've got one that I give to people all the time, and that is give them the gift of their struggle. Okay? You taking their struggle away from them is a disservice, because I don't know about you, but I grow through figuring things out. And if somebody, like, let's imagine it's a pickle jar at home, and I'm constantly having somebody open the damn pickle jar for me. I'm never going to get stronger, or at least that way, of opening the pickle jar unless I'm working on other things behind the scenes. So people constantly doing things for me weakens me. The same thing goes for being a therapist or a social worker. God bless social workers. Oh my goodness. Give them the gift of their struggles. Don't take it from them.
You got it.
Yeah, this has been, by the way, tremendous interaction for somebody who's currently part of a doctorate in similar topics.
Hey. Hey.
Dr. P, you're going now.
Oh, then I was going to quote Dante, abandon all hope.
Yeah, by the way, I'm not sure. There's been a lot of talk about the use of gaming, role-playing in terms of developing social skills, but where do you think, or do you think there is a space for this type of work in exploring and mediation of personal trauma? Almost in the way of almost a sort of like a group therapy. There's some really interesting stuff going on too. Ryan, you talked about video games, with the democratization of game design, and you're seeing a lot of people creating experiences for people to explain that is a mediation and exploration of their personal trauma, which is real loaded just to begin with in a whole bunch of ways. But I just kind of want to see what your thoughts are in that sort of space. That's mainly because that's a lot of where my interest lies. I can really use some of my essays.
Awesome. I want to see clinical role as an APA citation. There's less than 6 of us that you wouldn't do at all.
He would in-text. He would in-text. The first time you need all of us, and then just remove him always. Rule of thumb, take it out the room.
One of the groups I'm wanting to start, because I'm actually an Army vet, and so I've done a lot of PTSD work, and I actually want to start a PTSD group for veterans. So I haven't gotten that. I'm still working on getting players to the table to do that, but there's definitely a big space for that. I wish Janina's good for that too.
Oh my God,
And also, like, there's Grant Ellis, he runs not a therapy group, but just a group of players who are all vets, and then there is. I'm forgetting, it's D&D 214 is an organization that does D&D for veterans as well. And so they're tackling some of the trauma and working through some of those things. And I think one of the other things you were asking about there, though, is like when hot button issues come up for your clients at the table. And this is a technique I stole from you guys completely, which was to use your DM screen as a prop. When it's up, you're the dungeon master, you fold it up, put it down, game's on pause, and now we're processing what's going on at the table. So, those are some techniques. I stole that from you guys.
Yes, that's great.
That's a great one.
I'm glad.
Cite your sources.
One thing that happens a lot in drama therapy is a lot of enactment and playing out scenes. And there's often kind of an early thing that drama therapists want to do in enactment, which is reenact a traumatic thing, which is a terrible idea. Don't do that. Especially in a game like Dungeons & Dragons, it's supposed to be fun. But one of the things that Megan was mentioning earlier with her girls group is that they dealt with an NPC who was being bullied. And they weren't in the role of being the bullied ones who had to overcome the bully. They had an NPC who was experiencing bullying, and they got to be the helpers. They got to be the ones that had learned from experience, who had wisdom now and had strength. And that is a big, we deal with a lot of kids who have bullying experiences as well. And we don't want to put them into a situation where they have to overcome a bully, because what if they don't succeed? Then it reinforces this idea that you did something wrong or you're not good enough, and then it sort of re-traumatizes. So it's really important not to do that unless you're going to guarantee success and you have a lot of boundaries and a lot of structure there to make sure they're successful. Even then, I don't know if I would do it. But as in the game, you can have the person who has had an unpleasant experience be someone who is wise and helpful and can have compassion for someone else. I like to use the phrase analogical induction, which is, that's the phrase I like to use. It's actually from participatory theater, like political theater, that's my background. And it's this idea that in a scene, there are things you can take from. They're analogous to your real life, but they're not actually your real life. And so this character, who they're helping out, can take on all of the challenges that they live with. This NPC can say, man, I don't know how to go to school. I'm so worried, I'm so scared every time I do anything. I don't know what to do. And then those players can like in the story that Megan told, they can provide the strength and the wisdom and then see that character grow and analogously watch themselves grow.
I'll say this real quick, because I know we got a lot of questions and we're going to hear more. If you have it and we don't get to answer, feel free to just the hashtag Twitter, I'm new with this Twitter. Tweet or her nest with, it's at Clinical Role, and we can connect you with any of us. And as long as it's not like, like therapeutic questions, we'll do our best job today to answer. But we'll keep going.
We're also going to hang out right outside
Yes, we will.
the door, so if we don't get to your question, or if you didn't want to stand up and ask a question in front of a whole bunch of people, you can find us right outside.
Yes.
We're more than happy to talk with you. We'll be out there for a while.
Most definitely. All right, let's jump over to the side.
So I'm an LPC from the Philly area.
All right.
I've been following you guys for a few years, and I'm still waiting for whatever textbook that's coming in that's going to teach us to do all of this stuff. So that's really interesting.
What is that? So,
that thing we talked about? Yeah, so that thing
Here's the question. I I appreciate what you were saying earlier about kind of making sure that not only are your clinical skills excellent, but then also your GM skills are excellent.
That's chapter 1.
You know,
Outlining it now.
doing this stuff, you don't want to do damage or harm to anyone. So I'm in a position at my practice where we're going to be starting a groups portion that I'm heading up. And I'm really interested, we do a lot of work with kids on the spectrum, anxiety, ADHD, so it kind of falls really well into what D&D can be helpful for. And I'm finding on my own that I don't have a lot of knowledge of combining those two areas of knowledge, and I guess I'm wondering if you guys have sources, books, podcasts, like things that we can access as clinicians if we're trying to build this.
Well, there's this company called Game to Grow that's going to be starting this summer, right?
We have some webinars we're probably going to be offering this summer. So join the newsletter on meanmonroe.org/newsletter. Critical Core also is that thing we talked about earlier. It's going to be basically that. We also do consultations. If you want to video chat with us.
I'll say that I totally agree with what Dr. B was saying on the idea that you need to be good at both of these things. But I'll also say that right now there's really not a lot of education around doing what we do. And we all jumped into this by basically saying, oh, I know how to do this, and I know how to do this, well, I'll figure out how to put it together. If that's the place where you're at, where you have the training as a therapist and you have some of the experience that you need to be a good dungeon master, start putting it together. Start figuring out how those go together and start figuring out how to do this. There were a few texts that we used early on. The Functions of Role-Playing Games, which is a book that came out a long while ago by Sarah Bowman, who does a ton of LARP stuff. And it was her dissertation, and it really does a great outline for some of the basics for some of the work that we did.
Also, in the next edition of the recreational approaches to recreational therapy, our friend and colleague Hawk Robinson wrote a chapter about RPGs as recreational therapy.
And you actually really should look up Hawk's website, rpg-research.com. He's kind of the elder representative of what we all do. He's been collecting the limited research on applied use of role-playing games since 2004 officially.
Yeah.
I think like 15 years. Yeah.
I know, but he's been in a roundabout way DMing therapeutically, at least for recreational therapy, for almost 30 years.
I would say, as someone new to it, my best advice. Are you geeky in any way? Okay, yeah. I think we're all hearing this. You understand the mechanics of those, so the mechanics apply to someone. The thing that helped me the most was, so I don't watch all of it, just watching people play, or like Matt Colville I found helpful because he has short videos. I want to watch through like these long ones. And then also just get a local game store in your area if you don't have friends, and just join them Wednesday night where it's and play a little bit. And a lot of times they'll be helpful. Sometimes, they do not want you there. But other times they're very, very helpful.
I'll add one final thought to that. I am not a big believer in integrative therapy as a whole, and I'll explain why. It's not because I think it's a bad idea. I think it has a danger in diluting the idea of learn one system really well. Okay, learn one language to speak. And if you learn one language really well, whether that's CBT, whether it's psychodynamic, whether it's narrative therapy, whatever it is, you will be able to think about any other intervention through that language. When I think about narrative therapy techniques, I think about it in terms of behavioral reinforcement, externalization, social rehearsal, but I can apply it. If you learn one technique really, really well, you're going to start to see overlaps once you start to see playing Dungeons & Dragons or any role-playing game enough, and then you'll learn to apply it.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we are all going to hang out in the hallway up there, so please come ask your questions if we want to answer them. But guys, thank you so much.